It's the...
I watched it. She said that she claimed that...
No. I know the story well. I'll tell you afterwards. Okay, let's talk about disease. And you can see here this fascinating... Now, there's only a few notes on this one because this is the basic introduction. But you will need to colour red the things that need to be coloured red because they're important. I will emphasise some things as being definitely going to be on the exam. And there are a few terms to fill in. So you can see here, here's a painting from some time ago. They've got this guy, what an interesting device. This is to stop his legs from moving around. He's got his arms secured. There's a whole bunch of onlookers because that's what you want when you're having a surgical procedure.
Yes.
And maybe a bad tooth or something like that. And they know enough to pull it out. They don't know enough to clean their equipment before they do that. And they certainly don't have any drugs of any sort to relieve pain, which is not associated with disease, or even to treat any pathogens that they may introduce in the process. Okay, I read this fascinating story, and it remains one of my favourite stories. It's only a brief one about the only surgical procedure in history that had a mortality rate of 300%, because the surgeon did an amputation, and this was probably a couple hundred years ago, and he did an amputation, I think it was. They didn't say which limb it was, but it was about 7 seconds. So it's the fastest amputation in history, but the patient died, okay, from complications, probably infection. The surgical assistant lost fingers in the procedure because it was so fast, got blood poisoning and died, and an onlooker was shocked by the violence of it and had a heart attack and died. And that is a true story. But the interesting thing is 2 out of 3 people did die from disease, as we'd understand it. We've talked a little bit about what disease is, and only one of them died, I suppose, from what isn't a disease, but heart failure. But here is, just up there, highlight that. Disease is a malfunction of one or more body systems disrupting homeostasis. Okay?
Which one are we highlighting?
The red one. Yeah. Disease is when your body systems are impacted by something. Now, what that something is, well, is... and we'll look at the 3 ways you can get disease, because there are only 3. There's lots of diseases out there, but there's only 3 ways to get a disease. And one of them is pathogens. They're disease-causing agents, and you need to know all 5: bacteria, fungi, virus, prion, and protist. They are what we class as pathogens, which are infectious agents that cause disease. By infectious agents, we mean can be transmitted between people. Colour blindness, I'm not going to infect other people with colour blindness, but if I had some kind of virus like the flu, I could certainly infect other people. There's a lot of background information, but then we get into vaccination, which you should have an understanding of, and the germ theory of disease. So this germ theory of disease is key, because for most of human history, it's like, oh yeah, you got sick. So-and-so, Miguel is sick. Oh, he did something wrong. He didn't go to church on Sunday. God's angry. You know, which church? Doesn't matter. God's angry, whichever God. And that's why Miguel is sick. And that was pretty much human history.
There's so
in
many
a
other
nutshell.
names. There's so many other names. And you have to be
Okay. Now, 430 BC, so that's 2,500 years ago. 30% of Athens, the city-state, dies from plague. Not unusual. 30% of Europe died from plague. Okay, when the Black Death came through. Okay? The Black Death is caused by a bacteria and is actually responsible for changing human history on more than one occasion. It's like, hey, here's a big army. We're going to attack everyone. Black Death. We're not attacking anyone at all. Okay, the Mongols were stopped short by the Black Death. Okay, it has been used as a weapon of war. You know, oh, we've got sick people. Now they're now dead people. Let's catapult the bodies into the city. That has happened. Okay, that's biological warfare. Humans aren't nice. Well, we're going to cover that on the next slide. Now, Hippocrates. For a lot of human history, what the Greeks were saying about health and medicine became almost gospel, and humans didn't move on for literally more than 1,000 years. Okay, Aristotle said this, or Hippocrates said this, and he's responsible for the Hippocratic Oath. What's the Hippocratic Oath in medicine? Oh, if you're going to do medicine, first, do no harm. Doctors are not allowed to harm patients. And if you're not sure, you can't act. So that is the basis of modern medicine. First, do no harm. Then you can help. He had these ideas that, we have these, everything in the universe is made of these 4 elements: earth, fire, air and water, including us. And if you have an imbalance, if you're too hot, you have to get colder. If you're too cold, you have to get hotter. Okay, back, forth, back, forth. Sometimes that kind of worked, but most of the time it didn't. He died in horse poop because he was feeling cold, he was sick, didn't know what viruses or bacteria were, so he had himself buried up to his neck in fresh horse dung, because horse dung is really warm. And to restore his balance, he overheated, he deprotonated his proteins, and that killed him. So there you go. Now, and obviously wrong. Now, here we go. The Middle Ages. Middle Ages, 50% of children die before the age of 15. Big families, high mortality. It was just kind of normal to have 6 children and maybe only 3 get to adulthood. Maybe not. Black Death come through, maybe the whole family goes out. Okay? So, but disease is caused, and they believed, by the 4 humours: evil spirits or curses or God's anger. Potions, spells, prayers, charms, relics, pilgrimages were all the ways that people would treat disease, really, none of which would work. Okay? Leprosy was considered for most of human history to be a curse of God or gods, depending on which country you're in. It's a very, very nasty disease. It's caused by bacteria, Mycobacterium leprae. We know that now. So it's contagious, you can catch it, and it causes damage to ligaments, tendons, blood vessels. If your blood vessels stop working, then you get gangrene, and those affected areas will rot or drop off. It's when you're dead meat. Okay? And if your fingers have become dead meat, they're exposed to bacteria that break down dead meat. You know? The same way that a piece of meat sitting on a benchtop counter will go bad, you'll go bad. And so it was a horrifying disease. Here's an old woodcut picture of a leper, has a mask on to hide their disfigurement. Robes, long robes, they are required by law to ring a bell so that people can get away and maybe throw money at them to keep them away. Okay? They can only survive as beggars in a society like that. Now if you were to get leprosy is a tough one to kill, but you can do it with antibiotics. It's not 2 weeks though. It's a particular type of bacterium, I think it's called a spirochete. We'll look at the 3 shapes that bacteria come in. These ones look like corkscrews, and all of them are really bad. They are really, really bad, all of those particular ones. In fact, leprosy is one of them, but you can handle it. Medieval medicine. They used mathematics and astronomy and the 4 humours and religion and a bit of bloodletting as well. They'd throw that in. Oh, you're sick. You've got something bad in you. Let's get it out by randomly cutting a vein or several veins. Okay? And pay me money for it. Oh, and we're not talking about just doctors here. We're talking about barbers who wander the streets. I'll cut your hair. Give me a penny. You're sick. I'll cut your blood. Give me a penny. You know? And that's why the barber pole was red and white stripes.
Oh.
Okay? Yeah, really.
The what pole?
The barber poles. You know barbershop poles?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Red and white. The red is signifying blood.
Oh.
Okay? So there you go.
Fun.
So, leeches, not actual size. That's a much better way of getting blood out of people. That's one way that they used to do it without cutting people. No, leeches are not painful because they actually effectively anaesthetise that little area, and then they put an anticoagulant in. Still used today in medicine. They're back in favour because not to take blood per se, but if you were to have a crush injury from maybe something heavy landing on your foot, and your blood vessels are not functioning properly, and there's scabbing, clotting is occurring, and that means you're not going to get oxygen to your cells and they're going to die, throw a leech on there or a few leeches. And the anticoagulants, they'll get some blood, but the anticoagulants will keep the blood flowing in your crushed foot long enough for you to start to heal. And you won't lose that foot. Okay, so they do use them.
What happens if they suck out too much blood?
They can't. They're only leeches. They're not that size. Okay, here's an old diagram. Here's an old diagram from a medical textbook of where veins are or arteries and how to go about cutting people so that you can get bad blood out. I love the advice. Bleeding should be done when the moon is waning. Who knows why? None of this makes sense because then the blood is low. Men should be bled from the age of 12 to 80, but women, because they have more of the detrimental humours. Why do you get the feeling this textbook was written by a man whose wife was maybe made him a bit grumpy at times? Up to the age of 100. For therapeutic bleeding, use the veins nearest the disease part. For preventative bleeding, use the large veins of the arms. So every few months you go, oh look, I'm feeling a bit out of sorts. I'm going to go on a detox. And you'd go to the barber and they'd cut you and let some blood out. And you go, I feel better for that. Well, no, you didn't. You've made yourself a little more likely to get sick because you've got less blood. But yeah, there you go.
Who,
Yes.
in a lifetime, who bleeds a man?
I can't answer that. Okay, now, miasma theory. Here's miasma theory. Now, look at this plague doctor's costume. It's fascinating. He's got long robes on. Okay? He's got a hat on. He's covering up. His whole face is covered. He's got a long beak, which is stuffed with herbs that he's breathing through. So like, oh wow, they're finally cottoning on. They know. They're not silly. Humans, they're not, 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago, weren't stupid and we're somehow smarter. They were just ignorant. But they're starting to cotton on that, this person got sick, then everyone else in the house got sick. Oh, and it happened again and again and again. Something is spreading, okay? And they thought it was from air, that there was bad air. And so that's what miasma theory is, this idea that, oh yes, some bad air has blown in from the river and made the person sick. Not something in the air, just the air is bad. Okay? And so what you have here, he's got this beak on and everything to protect himself from the air, and also the robes protect himself from blood or body fluids or things like that. You have a higher likelihood of surviving in that environment, but it depends on what you're dealing with. Okay? So summary, pre-science, people believed diseases were caused by the environment. They knew that. Like they knew that if you're rooting around in a chimney from the age of 12, breathing in soot, you're going to start coughing, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. They knew that environment was responsible for doing things. Don't eat that food over there. Don't eat that old meat. You'll get sick. Yes? They knew that part. But they were completely ignorant about pathogens. What are the 5 pathogens? Bacteria. Fungi. Viruses. The last 2 are hard. Protists and prions. They're the 5. Well done. So they didn't know about pathogens. They're too small to see. Okay, everyone's real clear on bears. Bears, who died, he got eaten by a bear. I saw it. Fair enough. But viruses, bacteria, small. And genetics. They had no idea about DNA and inherited diseases. If a child was born with some kind of genetic condition like colour blindness, which is genetic, but something probably more visibly problematic, they might say, oh, the parents did something wrong and now God has cursed them with a sickened child, not very sympathetic. Or they might even say the child in a previous life did something wrong and God/gods have cursed them. And so again, not very sympathetic and, to be honest, not very helpful in terms of treating the condition. Now, we're getting somewhere. 1665. Now this is key. Micrographia it's a very big book. And this is a picture, so it's on about A3. This is a picture of a flea that Hooke did. And he was the first person, really, who said or had a look at things that were very small and said, hey, look, there's all this interesting stuff going on down there that we're ignorant of. Yeah? And that sort of started to wake people up. Van Hohenhoek, I can never say his name, 1674, recorded animalcules in lake water using a primitive microscope. He looked in water and lo and behold, there are dozens of different little things swimming around. Some of them are hunting each other. They're doing stuff in our water that we drink. Okay? That was a revelation, this idea that there's small stuff we can't see. And it's going to take a little while before people start to think, maybe some of those things we shouldn't be eating or drinking. Lady Mary Wortley, 1718, introduced variolation to England from Turkey to help fight smallpox, a very, very, very dangerous viral infection. Variolation is when you take the scabs from a sick person and you grind them up, then you put them into a glass straw and you blow them into the nose of another person.
Ooh.
Now, they didn't know why it worked, and why they come up with that series of steps, I have no idea. But what they were trying to do was, you know, they had this notion that you could pass on protection from the illness. They knew enough about that. If you do that, you might get a few dead viruses or weakened viruses, and you get them into the nose, they cross through the mucous membranes, some of them, and now you're going to get an immune system response. But it's very primitive. But these people were keeping their eyes out. Now, Edward Jenner, this is a really interesting one. You need to know Jenner, 1796, used cowpox to vaccinate his family from smallpox. They used to do that by cutting. They'd cut you and they'd infect you with with cowpox. Because people had noticed that milkmaids and horsemen who frequently would get sick with cowpox or horsepox, which is like a chicken pox. See where this is going? They'd frequently get sick with, well, actually, they'd not frequently, they'd only once get sick with cowpox or with horsepox, and they'd never get smallpox. Smallpox tears through London, kills a third of the population. 100% of cow handlers and horse handlers survive. Interesting. And so he sort of came up with this idea of vaccination based. Other people were doing the same thing in the Middle East, and within 50 years it became mandatory to have a smallpox vaccination because they could see straight up that this was useful. Okay? Vaccination is when you inject some material. Antigenic means it gets an immune system response from your immune system. Okay? So you take a part of a virus or a weakened virus, maybe a dead virus, and you put it into a person, and that lets the immune system develop a response to that virus. Not all viruses, just that one. It learns. It takes 5 days for your immune system to really ramp up, and some diseases will kill you in 5 days because they're quite virulent. But you can use smallpox, you can use, we can use a cowpox, which is similar enough to smallpox to get an immune system response going, and that protects you. And we're going to do vaccination quite a bit, so we'll be okay there.
We're going to get vaccinated?
Now, Theodore Schwann, 1838, suggests animals, like plants, consist of cells. He came up with the idea, the word cell, and you've got cell theory. The basic unit of life and organisation in all living things is a cell. If you pull a cell apart, none of the parts are alive. But a cell by itself is alive. You can have single-celled organisms that are alive. And so he said, yeah, look, we're not, you and I and the tree outside and the cow walking past and that budgerigar over there, we're all very distinctly physically different. But if we go down low enough, we're all very similar. We're all consisting of cells. Okay? And now you come down to here with Louis Pasteur. Spontaneous generation was the idea that living things could just pop out of nowhere. Okay, like, I left some bread out on the bench. I left some bread out on the bench last night, and I came back this morning and it had gone green. Ah, yes, the bread had turned into a plant of some kind. Not a fungi grew on the bread. The bread became a plant. If I leave food in the drawers over there, I'll come back in a couple of weeks, open them up, boom! The food has become mice. Not mice have been attracted to the food becomes mice. Louis Pasteur said, okay, that seems really, really, really unrealistic. So he performed an experiment. Now, obviously people at this stage knew that cooking food would make it safer. Don't eat raw food, you can get sick, so you cook it. But you know, bad air can cause things to happen. So what he did was, I'm going to boil these two identical glass flasks. I'm going to boil the food in there, the broth. Sandy, close it and I'll take it after. I'm going to boil this food and I'm going to let it settle. Now, this one here has a long access point for air to get in. So it's going to sit in the room and air from everywhere is going to be able to get in there. Dust and other things can't get in there because they'll get caught in this neck, but air will. This will sit there, not going bad. Nothing will grow in it, fungi won't grow in it, because all the fungal spores and everything get caught here. This one over here, I'm going to take the lid off. So the same air from the same room is going to get in there, and it's going to go bad because also dust particles will get in and they'll be carrying stuff. So Pasteur was really able to demonstrate elegantly that there were things in the air that were causing rotting and things to go bad. It's not the air itself. This idea that you can have bad air or night air is going to make you sick. Rubbish. Okay, there's something in the air, and it went from there. Now, Koch, I'll go through really fast. It's a basic idea. You don't have to take any notes. But what Koch really did, and they still use this in medicine today, this is the cornerstone of microbiology. You have a sick animal here. Okay, he took blood samples and was able to isolate using a streak plate. He'd plate it out. He'd get bacteria to grow on there, usually bacteria. Viruses won't work this way. He'd identify, oh wow, this rat's got a lot of these types of bacteria in its blood. So he'd go, I think that's causing the disease. He'd inject it into a healthy animal, and if that healthy animal also got sick and died in the same way, so same symptoms, shivering, whatever it might be, vomiting perhaps, 2 days life cycle for the disease and maybe death, and then he took a sample and he found the same bacteria, the same little animalcule living there, then he was confident that was causing the disease. So that was really, really important for establishing that very specific little animalcule things, that we now call bacteria, can cause disease. Not bad air, not God getting angry with you, or gods, or whatever it might be, not witches over here, none of that. Get exposed to those things and you can become sick. And so logically, if you avoid those things, you will not get that illness. See, remember Jenner was vaccinating against smallpox, but they didn't know what was causing smallpox. They just knew if you did this, you wouldn't get smallpox. Now we're starting to find out that this type of bacteria or this type of little animal, if you get that, that causes a disease. And that's the germ theory of disease. Now we've got a whole new branch of medicine. Environment, that causes disease. Now we've got things, germs or pathogens, they cause disease. Caused by microbes. Too small to see without magnification, they invade humans or living hosts. Their growth and reproduction within the host leads to disease. That's what's causing the problems. If we can prevent that, we can start to eliminate disease. We can maybe use drugs or change the way we do things, and we'll be okay. Now, can I change?
Yeah, you go.
Okay. Now, Semmelweis, the saviour of mothers. This is probably about 1840, 1850. He did some interesting work. He just looked at people getting sick after childbirth. And he went, if you wash your hands when you move between patients as a doctor, you can help eliminate fevers from disease. And that seems pretty logical. And I think everyone, if you visited a hospital, you'll see the little squeeze bottles are everywhere for cleaning your hands, yes? Everywhere, the sanitizers. He was treated like he was an idiot. People were very much less than kind because he was saying that doctors were responsible for spreading disease. And it was like, how dare you? I'm a highly trained physician. hands covered in gore, fingernails, dried blood or debris or whatnot underneath, going from patient to patient to patient, and they were highly offended that he would imply that, or state outright, that they were causing disease. But he was right. Metchnikoff, can never say it, discovered antibacterial of white blood cells. Now we're getting somewhere. Called them phagocytes. Okay, 1884, which is a crazy long time ago for someone with just very primitive equipment to work out that white blood cells are an important part of your immune system and they eat pathogens. Okay, you need to be aware of that because you're going to get tested on that. That's one of your early lines of defence. When something gets into your body, if a white blood cell sees it, it'll have a go. It'll try and absorb it, eat it, okay? And very, very important part of your immune system. Early, 1891, starts talking about antibodies, which you do need to know about, okay? Very important part of your immune system. That is where rubber meets road. When your body starts making antibodies, you're going to beat that virus, okay? But it takes about 5 days for the antibodies to come in, and maybe the virus will have killed you before then, okay? So antibodies are crucial. Summary, and you need, put a big pink box around that. Highlight it, asterisk it. You're going to get tested on it. There's no doubt about it. Diseases can be infectious, caused by pathogens. They can be non-infectious. That's genetics or environment. If I dig coal and breathe coal dust and get sick from doing that, you can't catch that from me. If that's environment. If in genetics, and you need to be clear on this one, genetic diseases can be passed down or are passed down from parents to children. Sure, but the child can't infect someone walking in the street past them. Yeah? That's an inherited condition or disease. Okay? But these people early on didn't even know about DNA. That was 1953. Okay? And then you've got infectious agents. What are the 5 pathogens again? Quick.
Bacteria.
Fungi, bacteria,
Virus.
protists, and prion or